Yes, I'm the content director here at Career Contessa, and today I'm actually in San Francisco at Modern Fertility with Dr. Erin Burke, who's here to answer some of our questions about fertility.
Great, thanks so much for having me.
So tell us more about what you do with Modern Fertility and what actually Modern Fertility is.
Yeah, so Modern Fertility is the fertility test that you can take at home. So I run research and clinical operations here at Modern Fertility. So do a lot of the research, dig into the data that we have available and make sure that it's understandable and really accessible for everyone. So, yeah.
Cool. So just so you guys know, this obviously is an Instagram Live if you're here right now. If you're joining us later, this will be live on this will be on Instagram for the next 24 hours. And then after that, we'll actually post this on our YouTube. So if there's any questions, you still have after this, you can access the answers or also comment on our YouTube to ask some more questions. We can keep this discussion going.
Great.
All right, cool. So our first question is something I'm really curious. What's the biggest misconception in your opinion about fertility?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think this is a thing that people often get confused about is that fertility isn't kind of like an on-off switch. It's not that you're either fertile or you're completely infertile. There's lots of different diagnoses that you can get that can make it more difficult to get pregnant. But if you're able to identify those early, especially earlier in life, then the prognosis for making sure that you can try to have a family, at least try to have a family naturally, is a lot easier. So there's lots of different ways that you can kind of work with the different fertility issues that you and your partner might be having.
Here's another one. How do I know if I'm ovulating?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So there's lots of different ways that you can try to figure out if you're ovulating. Probably the most common is what people do is the calendar method. So they kind of track their cycles and based on past cycles try to determine when they're going to be ovulating for future cycles. So you can do this the old-fashioned way on your calendar, but there's plenty of apps that you can also use now. It's generally thought that you'll ovulate sometime between day 14 to day 17, and that is referring to the days after your period. So the very first day of full flow of your period is day 1. So if you count forward to around 14 days, you can expect to be ovulating around day 14 to day 17. But what I think is also really important to know is that your cycles can change quite a lot from cycle to cycle. I think the stat is something like 30% of cycles are regular, which means that 70% of a woman's cycles are irregular. So that also means that tracking based on past data isn't always going to be as accurate. So it's always good to keep that in mind. But you can also look for different physiological things that could clue you into whether or not you're ovulating. So one is that your cervical mucus will actually change consistency. If you look for it to start looking like an egg yolk consistency, that's a sign that you might be ovulating. You can also sometimes feel ovulation, which I think is kind of cool. So, and I don't speak German, so I apologize, but there's a German word for ovulation pain.
Of course there is.
Yes, exactly. German word for everything. And it's called Mittelschmerz. So apologies to those people who speak German. I probably screwed that up. But that refers to kind of like the pain upon ovulation. So sometimes you can actually feel it. And then you can also test your basal body temperature. So there's temperature fluctuations as you get closer to ovulation. So lots of different cool ways to kind of check in on that.
Oh, wow, how fun. Do you have any apps that you like to use? I know I like to use just my Fitbit actually to track my ovulation and fertility, just to know my period, everything.
Yeah, I'm really old school. I put it on my calendar. So yeah.
Cool. So do women with PCOD face fertility issues?
Yeah, so PCOD, or sometimes referred to as PCOS, is polycystic ovarian syndrome. And so that's a condition where you actually develop a lot of follicles, which are the structures that house your eggs and your ovaries. But those follicles don't ovulate every month. So sometimes you experience issues with ovulation, or your ovulation and periods can be really irregular. And women often notice that they have PCOS when they go off of hormonal birth control for the first time, especially if you've been on hormonal birth control, since you were a teenager, your early 20s, that can kind of mask some of the effects of PCOS. So if you go off of it because you're either trying to switch birth controls or go off birth control or try to get pregnant, that's when you might first notice those irregular cycles, and that might be a sign of PCOS. But PCOS is really common. Actually, 1 in 8 women have PCOS, and so it can be sometimes easily treated by going to your doctor and talking with them about it, and you can actually get medication that can help you to ovulate.
Wow. Okay, here's the big one. We got a lot of questions about this, so I think we'll devote a couple minutes to this.
Great.
Egg freezing, like everything about the pros, the cons, when you should do it, how much it costs, is it worth it, what's the age I should do it, everything.
All of
everything.
Yeah, no, egg freezing especially in the last couple years has become a really interesting topic. A lot of women are wondering what exactly is involved in the egg freezing process, and I can give a very quick brief history of kind of how egg freezing came about. It's been around for quite a long time for women, especially young women or adolescents who were going through treatment for cancer. So radiation chemotherapy are really toxic to your eggs. And so egg freezing developed as a way to extract eggs from a woman's ovary before she then went through that treatment, so that after treatment she had a possibility to be able to get pregnant with those eggs naturally. In 2014, the American Society for Reproductive Medicine actually said, hey, you know what, egg freezing has been around long enough, it's safe, and we're going to no longer classify it as experimental, which meant that the general public could take advantage of egg freezing. So now, which is great, right? So now egg freezing is also referred to as elective egg freezing, or sometimes you'll hear it called social egg freezing. And this is the idea that a woman, or potentially a woman and her partner, decide that they don't want to have children right now, and because fertility declines with age for women, you want to freeze those eggs at a younger age when you have more eggs and they're higher quality, and then be able to start your family later in life. And so egg freezing
Hi guys, we're back. It might not have even paused.
No worries. Anyway, we're talking about egg freezing. So anyway, if you or you and your partner are interested in putting off having kids to a later age, you might want to freeze eggs at a younger age when you have more eggs and they're higher quality. And so egg freezing, what is important to know is that egg freezing is not perfect science. Even though we've progressed a lot in the ways and the techniques that we freeze eggs, it's not perfect. So usually you want to freeze at least 10 to 20 eggs, and that can sometimes take multiple cycles of what's called ovarian stimulation to be able to extract those eggs from your ovaries. And that can take a lot of toll on your body, and it can take a lot of time out of your life, and not to mention it's not cheap. So yeah, always people want to ask about how much does it cost. And it definitely varies depending on the clinic you go to or the region in the US that you live in, but you can ballpark around 10 grand per egg freezing cycle. And then you also have to think about the storage fees for those eggs, and that's usually a yearly fee or anywhere from like $300 to $700. So consider that as well.
And for each cycle, how many eggs can you typically extract?
Yeah, it really depends on the person, and actually AMH is a hormone that's really useful to be able to measure before the egg freezing procedure, because it allows the doctors to kind of have an estimate for how your ovaries are going to react to the treatment. And so if you have a low AMH for your age, it actually predicts that it will probably take more cycles to be able to get enough eggs to freeze. But a doctor will usually not proceed with the procedure unless they can see about 4 eggs that are developing in your ovaries. So they usually would say ballpark 10 to 20 is a good number to freeze. And that's because it's not an insurance policy. So even if you freeze 10 to 20, that doesn't mean you can have 10 to 20 kids with those eggs. During each cycle of the egg freezing process, you lose different eggs just to attrition. So if you have a good store of eggs, that's more likely to increase your chances that one of those eggs will end up with a healthy baby.
Wild. Cool. Well, I'm seeing if you guys want to submit any questions, we have a little more time, but I'm not seeing any in here.
Lots of waves. Hi, guys.
Yes, hi, guys. All right, so, I mean, thank you so much.
Yeah, no, this has been great.
So many more questions that are probably too personal for Instagram Live, but thank you guys so much for joining, and we'll see you soon.